Hello and welcome back to K-Pop and Glitter. So today's video is a day 6 cup and I based it off of some artwork that I saw, a photo shoot that I saw for the Gravity album from day 6, and I'll pop a picture of the photo in question that I referenced. So this is what we're doing. I started off with a base of just like a royal blue color, and I just painted it on. It's just acrylic paint, Craft Smart paint, and I just did a base coat of that. And now we're moving on to the next step, which is the more important step. So there is a technique called dirty pour. If you're unfamiliar with it, it's just taking a bunch of different colors, putting them all into the same container, and then pouring them on, though it's a little bit more involved than that. Normally people will cover the entire cup with their paint, and so they'll use a lot of paint to do it. And I've also done that before. I've done that with like wood grain tumblers. But this particular one, I didn't want it to cover the entire thing, so I very deliberately did not use very much paint. And maybe I still used too little, but we'll get to that in a minute. But what I ended up mixing up was a lighter blue, a green, a yellow, a red, a black, and one other color, white. So as you can see, the base color that I used there was green, because in the artwork that I saw, it seemed like green was a pretty predominant color. So I started with that color. And then as you can see, I'm just pouring all of the paint in one after another on top of it. And by the way, and to each one of these cups, I did add a couple of drops of water to it just to thin it out slightly so that it wouldn't clump up as it went down. And so as you can see there, I started at the corners, not the corner, at the edge, and I just dripped from there. And obviously there was not quite enough paint to like cover the bottom as well, but at the same time, I'm okay with that, because if I had had enough paint to cover that bottom, naturally it would have just been a huge amount of paint and probably too much for what I was going for. But I did end up taking out the last little bits of paint from the cups that I had and putting it on one side just to sort of even out the coverage of drips that were going down the paint. Now, if I was to do this again, one of the things I didn't realize when I did this is that the cup actually is sitting on a spray paint can, and what I didn't realize is that actually it was a little bit, you can see it's sort of tilted a little bit, and there I am fixing it. Unfortunately, because it had that tilt, you can see some of the lines as it's spinning are not quite straight, and if and when I redo this technique again, I'll be a lot more careful about making sure to keep the cup straight so that the lines are also straight and not jagged like that. So after I let that dry for about 2 days, I put a coat of epoxy over it to protect the paint. I will also say one of the things I had to do is the paint drips at the very bottom of the paint drip, the little rounded edge of the paint drip at the bottom, they were all very 3D. They stuck out quite a bit, and I had to basically take an X-Acto knife and sort of shave them down a little bit. And what I found is that at the end of each paint drip, the reason they were so prominent was because there was an air bubble in every single one of those drips. So if you're gonna attempt to do this like I did, while it's still wet, take a pin or something and try and pop that bubble to flatten that out. If I had known that there was literally every single drip, there was a bubble in the bottom of it. So, and like I said, if I was to do it again, I would definitely try and pop those before letting it dry fully. So there I went. I put down the epoxy and let it dry. I did actually 2 layers in order to smooth it out with those drips. So this cup is for a friend of mine named Jedson. He's a huge fan of day 6, so that's why I made this cup for him. This is going to be a Christmas present for him. And so I just have his name in white, and I'm putting that between these 2 drips here, so that way it's very noticeable and very prominent. And we're just going to put that right over. There we go. Looks nice. I wish I'd put it a little higher, but you know, it is what it is. I wasn't about to scrape it all off and put it back on again. So now we're putting the day 6 logo, and there we go. And so this was actually a relatively easy tumbler. So we got that all on there and it looks really good. And what I decided to do, I recorded this. I don't normally record this part, but what I decided to do in this case is actually show the cleaning process. Before I put on the final layer of epoxy, I always clean out the inside of my cups. And that includes cleaning out the spray paint that's in there, any additional paint that has gotten in there or epoxy, and I'll shave off the top layer of epoxy because usually there's paint underneath that. And then that way I can epoxy over that. So you'll see me using the X-Acto knife, but I want to go back to what I actually used to clean out the paint on the inside. What I actually use is steel wool along with Gooby Gone, and I just sort of gently rub it the inside with that, and that has gotten my cups so clean on the inside. The only drawback, and I'm gonna be very, very specific about this, if you decide to use this technique, do not use it anywhere near your working area. So as you can see, I'm using it here. This was before I knew better. You might be able to see on the paper towel some tiny little fibers. Some of that is paint, most of it is paint, but there's also tiny little fibers, dark fibers that have come from the steel wool itself. And what I didn't realize is that those fibers have literally gotten everywhere, all over my work surface. And the XO cup, for example, which I believe I posted last week, those fibers are what basically ended up ruining that cup. So for future reference, it's a great technique, the steel wool and the Gooby Gone. It gets my cups incredibly clean on the inside, but don't just do it in another room. Do it in another part of your house where you don't necessarily have to worry about stuff settling in your epoxy like that. So I'm still dealing with that issue, and I'll put it to you this way. I'm not doing any lighter colored cups for a while, not till I'm absolutely positive that those fibers are gone. But anyway, so back to what's going on here. I did 2 extra layers of epoxy over, this is just the first layer, but I did 2 extra layers of epoxy just to completely smooth it out and make sure that the paint at the top was nice and sealed in as well. And pulled out any little fibers, and then I blow torched it just to get the bubbles popped. And that's pretty much it. It was a very simple cup. There was no glitter involved because it's for a guy, and some guys are fine with a little bit of shine. I wasn't necessarily wanting to do that, and also I think it actually matches the original photo pretty well. So hopefully this was a pretty easy it's not a tutorial, but it's pretty easy to follow. I think I'm gonna redo this idea again, just with a different cup and with no steel wool around. And this is the final cup. I actually really love how it turned out. Like, I think it's really great for a guy, and it doesn't necessarily have to be for a dude, obviously, but I think it turned out really, really cool, and I know Jetson will be like stoked to get it. So anyway, that's pretty much it. The next video I post, I believe, will be my ATEEZ cup. And, that one should be out hopefully next week. So anyway, that's it. Have a good day. Bye-bye.